This program is supported by Main Street Bookends of Warner for books, toys, games, cards, gifts, and a gallery of local art. Main Street Bookends of Warner.
Welcome back to Your Yankee Chronicle. I'm your host, Abby Peel. Give them a fish and they eat a meal. Teach them to fish and they eat forever. Let's head down to Main Street Warner and hear more about that philosophy.
Thank you, Abby, and welcome to the Jim Mitchell Community Park. Main Street Warner's wonderful stage and amphitheater. But this morning, we're at the Children's Park, the last part of the park to be developed. And the plan is to create a more edible landscape on this side of the park, growing food, vegetables, nuts, fruits, berries. And later on, we're going to be introducing a lot of interactive elements for children. We're fortunate to have Andy Jeffery here, as well as Meg Whitmore, with Feed Kearsarge and Kearsarge Neighborhood Partners. So, Andy, could you tell us about these two wonderful organizations and the effort not only here in the park, but throughout the Kearsarge region?
Thank you, Neil. Feed Kearsarge began in 2020, and it stands for Food, Education, Expansion, and Distribution. And it's a cooperation between a number of organizations, including the Kearsarge Food Hub, Kearsarge Neighborhood Partners, Spring Ledge Farm, Colby Sawyer College, Main Street Warner. And we've been focused on, since the beginning of the pandemic, what can these organizations do to help people become secure with their food? And one of the programs we began with was Tray It Forward. And Tray It Forward was designed to grow vegetable seedlings and to distribute them to people with food insecurities throughout our region. And in 2020, we thought that was a great idea, but we learned at the end of 2020 that just giving people vegetable seedlings doesn't inherently make them a farmer or a gardener. And so in 2021, we began the Victory Garden program and established Victory Gardens here in Warner and in Bradford and at Colby Sawyer College, where people are free to come and learn how to transform their vegetable seedlings into edible foods. And the reason behind all of this isn't just about food. It really, I'd say, even has more to do with community, because the whole label of Victory Gardens was something we borrowed from the World War II effort, that during the war, people were encouraged to grow their own gardens to take some pressure off the food supply chains. And it really turned out to be an amazing community building opportunity. And that's where KNP, Kearsarge Neighborhood Partners, comes in. We looked at the opportunity to add another Victory Garden, and we found folks to cut up these boards, this nice hemlock, and installed the garden. And then we got the tray from the Tray It Forward program. And from there, Neil, somebody planted it, and it's turned into this wonderful thing. Why don't you tell us about that?
Thanks, Andy. This coincides with opening up this part of the Jim Mitchell Community Park in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic, and responding to that crisis by Main Street Warner starting their Farms and Food Project.
And one of our first stops was across the street at Meg Whitmore's home, and we delivered plants, and she planted them, and they grew amazingly, and she's given us feedback, and we've shifted into a container garden format because of her feedback. But I want to introduce Meg Whitmore. She's one of the stars of the Tray It Forward program.
I don't know quite how to react to that. It's true. 2020, Dorothy and Andy came to my home with a small packet of seedlings. I had, over the years, collected all kinds of containers. I've lived in mostly small rental properties, so I didn't have an in-ground garden to dive into. So it was not just the seedlings. It was the information that they also shared, that Spring Ledge Farm and KNP and Feed Kearsarge came together, printed information that gave me the guidance to understand what each plant needed in a container rather than the ground, in terms of what kind of soil, what kind of root growth they needed, what kind of space, what kind of feeding, etc. So I had all of these containers, some of which were my storage containers I just drilled holes into, and garbage cans and things I found at the dump. I figured as long as it's clean, as long as it's up off the ground, because I basically, as you'll see, my garden sits on gravel, which is on top of a propane tank that services the restaurant next door. But what I found was, if I paid attention, if I educated myself, if I read the materials, if I chatted with people, I could grow a garden that would produce food for my table. So my background here was, I was a client of the Warner Food Pantry. And I found myself in financial difficulties and welcomed the support that they had. And through that connection, I met all of these marvelous people who were addressing what I felt was a community inspiring effort to help us, those of us with financial challenges, to take a bit more responsibility for our own food production. And what it's turned into, I think this must be the fourth year I've done it. First couple of years where, I was learning. This year, it's just an abundance that I honestly can't even describe. I mean, my squash plants are inhabiting rock crevices, and the tomatoes are growing into trees, and it's just an extraordinary abundance this year. But what I have found is that in my growing and my sharing of information with fellow clients at the pantry, or just with my neighbors, the whole theme of community developing opportunities is taking hold. It's taking root, literally. And I remember growing up with this sort of kitchen garden, is what we used to call it, and sharing the bounty, which I've already started to do. And I can't say enough about these programs. I mean, we are so fortunate to live in this community with the kind of organizations that support all of us who believe in community building efforts. And this is one that's just so much fun to watch things grow from tiny, tiny little plants. I love it.
You can find out more information about these wonderful community-based organizations at their websites. And again, we're grateful for these organizations and the opportunity to collaborate with Main Street Warner and help to feed the community. Because of these wonderful organizations, the work of Main Street Warner, this is another reason why we always say there's something wonderful happening in Warner.
Thank you to Main Street Warner and to the Kearsarge Neighborhood Partners for your efforts to feed everyone. Every year, Skip Haas challenges the Colby Sawyer swim coach to swim across Lake Sunapee to the beach. It's up here next on Yankee Chronicle, so stay tuned.